everybody. My name is Felicity, and welcome to another episode of Vivons Visible, the accessible podcast, the new podcast brought to you by ACEPS. The goal of this podcast is to have a space to talk about all kinds of things that could be of interest to the community of students with disabilities and to the public in general. It's a place to share ideas and experiences, to better understand ourselves, and of course, to discover new things. We will be joined today by my co-host, Leigh Smith, who you met in the second episode of our podcast. Leigh is a student in social services at Dawson College. Today we will be talking with Mary Boswell, a cégep student currently in her third year studying social services, also at Dawson College. Mary's goal is to work with neurodivergent children or young people once she has completed her program. Okay, so hi everybody. Hi Mary.
Hi
Leigh.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate coming in.
How's your school year going? It's a couple of weeks in.
I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot because I have my schedule wasn't as great. So I'm at school from Monday to Wednesday between 8 to 5:30. So I'm at school pretty much the whole day. It's kind of like a working shift. But other than that, everything is really good. I really enjoy my class. I really like the teachers that I am partaking in the class. And yeah.
Is this your last year in the program? Or?
Technically, it's supposed to be my last year, but I took an extra year just to finish up my other general education courses. Mm-hmm. So I am taking my time to graduate.
Okay.
It's really important to take your time when learning new things.
And you have a stage as well? Yes.
My stage is currently at a resident home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working with older adults with minimal to no autonomy. So far it's going really well. I'm learning a lot from the field that I'm in.
Okay. I find it's cool that you're doing classes and then once a week you have a stage and the stage goes the whole semester.
Yeah, for the year.
Yeah. It's a great way to put into practice what you're learning.
Oh, of course. I noticed that a lot. Even my stage from last year, every time there's a situation, I'm like, oh, that makes sense because of the amount of stuff I learned in the class. I'm like, oh, this makes sense. I know what they mean by that. And I'm like, okay, so I'm kind of constantly connecting between theory and actual practice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a teacher before, and our stages were, you cram all the courses into the semester, mm-hmm. and then at the end of the semester or during, you have this intense stage.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes wonder, maybe if it had been more relaxed, 1 or 2 days a week stage, a couple days a week courses, and you can really sort of look at what's going on a little bit better.
It's interesting that you mentioned about that. That's how our program works too, is they base on what kind of class that we're taking and then the amount of stage that we're supposed to partake. Right now, for second year, we're taking stage once a week, and then gradually it goes from once a week to 2 days a week to 3 days a week. Because a lot of times, some students, what they take is they take more than 8 classes, and then they jungle up with the stage, and on top of the responsibilities and work and stuff, so there's a lot of cramping. So that's why, in my situation, I like to take my sweet time, and I really emphasize on mental health. Mm-hmm. So mental health is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So I would plan things ahead of time. Okay, I'm gonna find a day where I'm just gonna not focus on school, not focus on work and stage, and just focus on my mental health and myself.
Yeah, because I feel like there's certain programs where, self-care should be the number one priority in order to do your job well. Mm-hmm. And so 11 classes should be discouraged if possible.
Well, that's what we're taught. But I think there's also there's a lot of pressure to graduate on time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whatever that means. But there's also a lot of pressure to finish quickly so you can start working because, it's hard financially for a lot of students. And so they kind of want to just power through it so they can actually start making a living wage.
And
it's not...
sorry.
Oh, no, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, but also too, I also think of especially younger students too who live with their parents. What if their parents have high expectation on their child, okay, you better finish on this certain date, or you better get married at a certain date, or you better have this job, or else I'm gonna disown you type of stuff. So but it's I really wish that some people could have the mindset of you know what, it's okay to take your sweet time, because I find I've done this before where I rush, and then when I get into the actual position and I'm like, oh god, what the hell did I just learn? So I feel like it's really important just to take it easy, really listen to your body and your limits, because I feel like there are some who don't listen to their limits and then they end up being burned out.
When Leigh mentioned that they had a friend who had an interesting school experience, and then we talked, and you have a really interesting school and educational experience, which I think may have led you to now at cégep being very mindful of how you take care of yourself and your learning process and all of that. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about like your elementary school experience and all that.
If I have to describe one word, it was hell. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I didn't have a great experience at like elementary school. At the time, they did had special ed technicians, but they weren't the type to be like very supportive and very like not nice in a sense. Like a lot.
So you went to a specialized school?
Yes.
And just for people listening, why were you at a specialized school?
So I went to Summit, and the reason I went to Summit because I had a speech delay at a young age, and the school that I was at before didn't have the tools, so my mom put me into Summit School to help me with my speech.
Okay.
So when I was there, although like there were times where like there were areas where like they did support me, but it was just there were some educators I find that like they weren't supportive in a sense of like they often discourage a lot of students with disabilities, like saying like, oh, you can't make it far in life because you have a disability. And it was quite interesting to receive that, because I was like, no, I'm capable of more than that. Just because I have a disability, it doesn't mean that like I'm not able to live, right? So what I did was I spent my years at Summit, and then I went to Westmount, and then when I graduated Westmount, I wanted to apply for cégep, but what was odd about like applying to it, when I was applying to cégeps, I was getting declined a lot. So I'm like, okay, maybe I have to go to adult ed and stuff. So pretty much when I went to adult ed, they were like, oh, you don't have your transcript of what you're talking about. So this whole time when I was in Westmount, I wasn't following the Westmount protocol. I was following the actual Summit School protocol, and they didn't have like we didn't have like transcripts or report cards. So when I went to adult ed, I had to redo everything all at the beginning. So like, mind you, I was 17 years old and doing grade 7 work.
It's like your parents weren't really told about your education. It was just like, okay, your child has these difficulties, and so she's gonna follow like a specialized program. But it was never said, oh, and she won't get a high school diploma.
Yeah.
Which is just shocking to me.
Yeah,
it sounds a little misleading.
Yeah, because they would tell my mom like, oh, she's gonna have like great support, which I did, but it wasn't like she's gonna have that support, but she's not gonna excel as in like, going to cégep and stuff because of my disability. So I remember when I was in like Westmount and I was doing my math, for example, I was like, why am I doing this math, and why is it so easy for me? And like I was like most advanced student in the classroom. So when I graduated that school, I found out that this whole time, because my mom asked questions like, oh, like she wants to go to cégep and all that stuff, but why she can't like register. But this whole time I was doing grade 3 work in a high school setting.
And the only it's so shocking, although I've heard similar stories, and it comes back to you started talking about this before, but yeah, a disability, it's not intelligence.
No. And like I feel like a lot of people are associating with intelligence. It's not have to do with intelligence. It's just there's certain areas that a child or an adult has a struggle with, and they just need support for that. But obviously because of the stigma and like how people portray people with disabilities, they automatically assume like, oh, this person is not smart. They're not capable of doing like higher education. So when I went to adult ed, I was like really like discouraged, because it was like this whole year of like going through high school. This whole time I was doing elementary school work. instead of high school score.
You could have finished like everyone else at 17 years old kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I did want to live in the cégep like life at a 17-year-old, but I couldn't because there was misleading information that I was received from the teachers and what my parents received.
It almost sounds like they were giving the impression that they were supporting you, but it wasn't appropriate at all.
Exactly. And I find some who are special ed techs is like, to me, when I understood what a special ed technician is you're there to support students with disabilities and actually encourage and motivate them to excel. And what I've seen when I was at Summit School, for some teachers I've witnessed, they were just frustrated with them. I'm like, you can't get, like, to me, it's like, you can't get frustrated at somebody if they can't grasp on the information accordingly. Why don't you just understand the level of the child's comprehension and actually kind of balance it and actually level their levels of understanding and explaining it to them.
There are many ways of explaining the same thing, and I think people kind of get stuck sometimes on like one way of explaining it, and it's like if you don't understand it this way, then there must be something going on. But like maybe
and it's like, oh, how come you can't get it? Like it's an easy task. Like no,
you were at a specialized school, where apparently this is what they specialize in, like kids with learning disabilities, and to help them and guide them through their education. And yet there seem to be a lot of areas that there's a lack of understanding, support, this whole misunderstanding, like disability intelligence, what the child needs. You mentioned when we were talking before, like just ask the kid, like, is this helping you? Like, can maybe we could try a different way? Yeah,
because I was... When it comes to like not understanding for a kid, instead of being like, oh, like what is there you're not understanding, like why don't you ask them like, oh, describe me what you're not understanding, because sometimes some of them needs reassurance, like maybe I'm understanding but I'm not sure if it's the same way that they're trying to ask me a question. So just navigating through what they're having a hard time with, or especially emotions too, that can actually help a person who are neurodivergent to be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling like this, and that way you can help them to identify like, okay, you're having a hard time with studying the questions, or this topic, this feeling, etc., etc. And I feel like people can get so easily frustrated.
It sounds like maybe the teachers also had some kind of negative view of disability. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm wondering how do you think this would have impacted students' self-image and like the way they go about life?
Well, a lot, because, you know, you've been told this for a very long time in a negative way that you started to slowly convince yourself like, maybe I am this way, or I can't excel because of what they told me. So it does have an impact a lot, especially on a child's self-esteem. Like I know for me, like growing up, I struggled a lot with like my identity, especially being a mixed race girl who's also Anglophone and who's also has a disability. So I'm like, till this day, I am still like, you know, understanding myself, and then I'm just looking back and I'm improving so much. But I still have my moments where like these kind of words and like labels that I've been put at a young age, it still lingers around.
Yeah.
So I just feel like people should be more kind.
I kind of want to point out Mary's on the honor roll at school.
Oh.
Yeah.
FYI.
I haven't been at school in so long. I kind of forgot. Honor roll is 80 and above?
85 and above, I think.
And I took 7 classes.
Wow.
Yeah, and I managed to do.
There was all this judgment passed on you as a kid. I just want to like go back in time and like be like,
Advocate. Yeah.
She's gonna grow up, she's gonna be a social worker, like you don't even know. But I think there's so many problems in our education system, like I witnessed them as a teacher and stuff, and disability is just there's so much misunderstanding. And one of the things that I notice a lot, there's this idea that it's static. Like you got this diagnosis at whatever age. You know, some kids get diagnosed at 3-4 years old, you know?
Yeah, that's the age why I got diagnosed. I was 4 years old when I was diagnosed.
And for some people, it's like, oh, okay, diagnosis done. For the rest of your life, till the end of time, you will be whatever the diagnosis is.
Whatever we think you are.
Where obviously everything's evolving, you know, education, learning, skills can be learned, like, I don't know, just normal. But the mentality of some people is just that, no, it's like this forever. written in stone.
And people don't realize that you grow out of it within time. Doesn't mean that it doesn't go away. Like, you grow out of it, you receive the help and support. It's just, I just find like when you get a diagnosis, I'm like, yep, that's you forever.
Yeah,
I'm not going to help you.
Like, I wonder if you went back to some teacher at Summit who maybe wasn't supportive, and you're like, I'm on the honor roll at Dawson.
Oh yeah, this one teacher.
FYI.
the same teacher.
Look at me now.
I remember, because I was talking about, because originally as I'm reflecting on my teenage years, I wanted to become a psychologist. Originally, I wanted to become a psychologist because I always have the love to help people. Like, I just enjoy, helping people and like kind of lifting them up, being a better version of themselves. And I remember talking about it with a few of my best friends when I was in high school, and he went around, he heard me, and then he made an announcement like, you guys, because you have a disability and you struggle with certain areas, you're not going to make it far in life.
Who said that?
This teacher. As the same teacher I had an argument with where I had a strong opinion about Lord of the Rings because it was his favorite movie, and then I stayed in my opinion because I noticed that with other students, they always agree to what he's saying, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to agree with what I'm going to say. And I said Lord of the Rings is the boringest movie I ever watched, which is true because I watched, and it's not like I didn't watch it. I did watch it, and I'm really sorry for those who are a Lord of the Rings fan.
It's really long.
It's really long, and especially with me with ADHD as well, I can't sit for 3 hours watching a movie. So I said it like, I'm sorry, it's the boringest movie. So he got mad at me and he started arguing with me, and I'm like, I'm really sorry. I watched all 3 parts of these movies and I can't sit and watch it. It's not my interest. Like, he's really arguing a 14-year-old student, and it took one teacher to be like, hey, you're arguing with a child. And he went quiet.
Can't people have different opinions about
Apparently
a movie
not,
of all things?
Exactly. And that's what I noticed when I was at that school, is that everyone is always agreeing to what the teacher has to say. It's like, no, you should have a freedom of your own opinions. Like, rather, and the true definition of an opinion is whether if it's right or wrong. Yeah. I don't have to agree with you, but I will respect you. But the fact that you are arguing with me, you took it to offense because you took it very personally because it's your favorite movie. Look, there are some things that we like to do, and like, if you don't like it, I'm like, okay, it's fine, but you don't argue.
Yeah. I think like when you're a kid, you look to adults like, oh, like they've gotten far. They have a job. They have a house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They must know something. Like, they must be doing something right. But the reality is like, not really.
Yeah.
It's like, no, people don't know as much as they think they do, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
People do know a lot, but like, I think we need to be more careful about like who we trust in terms of telling us about who we are and what we can do.
Yeah, because my whole life, I was told that. I remember there's always that one word that always slides in my head. It's like, you can't do it. You're not going to make it far in life because you're diagnosed with A to Z. You're not going to make it far compared to neurotypical people. And I'm like, I remember I'm sitting there, and I remember him telling everyone that, and I'm like, watch me. Despite that, I found out that they didn't follow Westmount's educational policy, and then I had to find out when I went to Adelaide that I never had a high school diploma / certificate, like a transcript. I had a certificate. It wasn't a high school diploma. It was just a certificate like, oh, I completed the program.
Like, great job.
Excellent.
You were present.
It's like a sticker.
In attendance of school.
And I sit there, although I felt discouraged, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this one person affect me, who I am as an individual. So it took me 2 years to actually complete my high school diploma. That means I paid for tutoring. I went to Saturday classes. I took summer schools. I was not giving up. And I graduated at 19. So
congratulations, by the way.
Congratulations. Congratulations. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm not going to let no teacher telling me I can't make it far in life.
Oh, it makes me so sad because teaching and education should be the opposite. Like, dream big and go for your goals, and the sky's the limit. But you mentioned that there's other people in adult ed that had a similar experience to you.
Yes, I was in a math class, right? And obviously it's my first time coming to adult ed, and I mean new people, because I'm so used to hanging out with other neurodivergent people. I was like, okay, I'm meeting people from various of areas, whether it's they're immigrants or are just finishing up their high school, etc. And I was having a conversation with this girl, and I was like, oh, so what brings you to adult ed? Because that was the first question I asked. Because people have like different reasons coming to adult ed. So she was telling me that like, oh yeah, I went to A to Z school, and I was also in a specialized classroom, and they told me that I was gonna get a high school diploma and I was gonna finish like within 3 years in high school. But then I found out that I never had transcript this whole time. So I'm sitting there, I'm listening to her, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I am going through that same situation too. So it's like, really? I'm like, yeah, this is insane. Like, I feel like people deserve to have careers. I feel like people, especially students with disabilities, deserve to learn things
and choose their own paths in life.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think people should have full control over what kind of education they receive.
Yeah.
And be told all the options, and not just, oh, you will work in a grocery store. Like,
that is something that gets me really upset, because it's like, I've known a lot of people I went to high school with, elementary school with, that had full potential. Like I had one kid who was a great artist. Like he did a full on self-portrait of himself, like identical. And he works at a grocery store, a restaurant as a concierge or a cleaner.
And it just seems a lot of students who have been labeled, you know, X, Y, and Z, those are the options that are laid out for them. So then you might not necessarily explore other options or think, oh yeah, maybe I could be a graphic designer. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? But maybe it was just like, nope, okay, grocery store, or, you know, I don't know what the other options they're telling kids based on these limited definitions.
Yeah, and like I went to a similar school where they tried to help you find jobs, but like it was those kind of jobs, like restaurant, groceries. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, that's not me. That's not me. And the amount of times I encourage other people, other classmates, like, hey, you're more than just a disability. You're more than just a disability. I always point out their strengths. Again, words do affect people, right? So despite that, like they have their strengths, like it still lingers around. And it's kind of like there's a cycle to it that's like you're having a hard time breaking into.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience where like with career counselors and stuff like that, they'd be like, well, it looks like you can't do anything except for take surveys at home and stuff. I had a counselor actually say that. So but otherwise they're like, yeah, can you work at a grocery store, like you said, or like can you work in retail and stuff like that? And it's like, well, you know, I'm not just here for capitalism. We're here for other things, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
There's always a stereotype. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
you have this. I think you deserve to be placed there. What if you don't like it?
Yeah. What if we hate it?
Yeah. Like, what if it's not our cup of tea? So
yeah.
Was your family always supporting you and encouraging you?
Yes. More specifically, my sisters. When I was nonverbal at a young age, they were there to like help me like say words, because when I started speaking a little bit, I was just naming everything daddy. Like daddy. Even like I told my mom daddy, and my mom was really upset. I'm like, it's mommy. I'm like, no. I'm like, daddy. But that's the only word that was like easy to grasp onto it. So when I slowly started to like kind of gain more in my vocabulary, that's where my sister comes in, because I have a big family. So I have like 3 sisters and 3 brothers. My 3 sisters will come here, and let's say I'm trying to pronounce a certain word, they will like come sit next to me and be like, we're gonna break these words. Like there's one word that I had a hard time pronouncing was dictionary. And a lot of times I got in trouble from teachers because they thought I was calling them a dick. And I'm like, no, that's not a part. It was to the point I had to like really point at the book, like, hey, this is what I want. And my sister told me, like, here, if there's a long word, break it into 3 columns. Dictionary. Say it slowly. Dictionary. And she would often do like a repeat. And said, once you get comfortable, they say it fast. And they helped me a lot with that. And they also helped me a lot with scenario-based, like kind of like conversation. So for example, let's say I'm in a situation where somebody asks me, oh, do you want to lift? What do you do in that situation? because I find that when I was at Summit School, a lot of the people that I went to school with didn't have that kind of a tool of like, okay, what to do in a situation where you're feeling like your life is in danger or that you don't feel safe,
like kind of basic safety things.
Yeah. So my sister and plus my mom, like all my families taught me a lot about you know, safety scenarios and stuff. Because even sometimes I have conversations with them, I'm like, yeah, I was in a situation like this and that, and she's like, I'm glad that you did it, but maybe you could have worked it that differently. And I'm like, and they break it down to my level of my understanding too, because sometimes when my sisters tend to be very straightforward. And then sometimes I'm like, when you're straightforward with me, I'm like, huh? Like, I don't get it. But then when they break it down to me and I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
It's like you need more details.
Yeah, I need more. Well, that's the thing with neurodivergent people. Yeah. We're very good at contextualize. We learn better if you contextualize a lot of things. If you tell us one thing that's like, kind of felt like it's like very vague.
Vague or too simple things.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, too simple things.
Yeah.
Like if I'm like, for example,
like when we were learning about neurons and stuff like in school, I remember going like, this like makes zero sense, but it was like very basic. Like, this is the soma, this is the dendrites, this is the, you know, like the axon and terminals and stuff like that. But there was no like, they're like, oh, this electrical signal goes from like one side to the other, but it's like, but wait, how? Like it doesn't just like go, but like that's all they kind of like in the very basics. But then if you break it down, there's like whole chemicals that like come in and out of the now I forget what the word is anyway, the tube that goes in the middle that's covered.
I feel like I learned this
sheath
20 years ago.
Yeah, so like
I think I learned it too, but I forgot.
Yeah,
but that's something that I was not into because I'm into the field of helping people. So it's like, okay, there's something that's on my interest.
Anyway.
But once you understood more details of the why,
so like
you couldn't just accept,
the chemicals go in and
happens,
out, and they change in such a way that it allows electricity to pass. And there's a myelin sheath that kind of like a wire, so like it protects it and helps it like go through and stuff so like if there's not enough details, like it doesn't, I don't know.
I feel like that could apply to like even now as you're talking about. I'm like, it's kind of like you know, like how we like dressing up, like we were talking about before, dressing up to go to work. Right. It's like, okay, but why? It's like, well, actually, because, you know, it gives a good impression if you dress nice. It makes, you know, people feel like you're well put together. You have everything under control. I don't know, whatever it is,
but power.
Yeah, but otherwise we're just like, why can't I wear sweatpants?
Even though we'd like to say, oh, we don't judge and for everything, people do judge.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd trust a doctor in sweatpants.
I would be concerned.
Yeah, me too. I'd be like,
wait a minute.
Are you sure you're my doctor? Like, you're dressing too comfortably. Like,
or like if they're wearing some ripped up T-shirt, or like I'd be like,
that's my cute sleep at the clinic.
Yeah.
So we were talking about your sisters explaining social stuff with you.
Yeah.
You had a really interesting story of when you were at the gym one time.
Oh, yeah.
And you got, sensory overload. Because
for a very long time, because my sister were pressuring me to like, learn to accept yourself and your disability. And a very, very long time, I had a hard time accepting it. But then the concept of overstimulation, I didn't know where to identify when I'm overly stimulated. So one day I went to the gym by myself and I felt very weird. I was like, I'm on a Stairmaster and I'm like, I don't feel good about myself. I just don't know why. So then when I took out my headphones, there was music, there was people talking, there was like weights put it in, and I'm sitting here and like I'm like on the Stairmaster and I'm like, I am overly stimulated. Is this what overly stimulation is about? Now I get it. Like I like, it was my first time actually identifying my sensory overload, because there was so much going on. And also too, like I had that feeling for quite some time, but I didn't know what it was until like I started to learn more about sensory problems and then being overly stimulated. And then I'm like observing the gym without my headphones and like hearing music, people talking, and how it feels internally. Just like, this is what overly stimulation feels.
How does that feel inside your body?
It feels like something's crawling up, like especially here and behind my ears.
So your chest and neck and kind of...
I don't know how to explain, but it's just...
I can see your body language. You already look super uncomfortable.
Going back to the gym concept, I'm like, why am I feeling off today? So that's why I wear like big headphones and blast music up, because it calms down the...
blocks out the other...
It blocks out people. And then also my sensory overload. It's just like, okay, it's just like breathing.
But this was the day that it was kind of a revelation, and that was when your sister, I think she taught you about something like a strategy to manage it or something. I don't know. You're saying a story about mindfulness.
I was going, like, I think at 19 was like a rough year for me. Like, I was like really like, again, I was at the moment in my life where I wasn't accepting myself. I was still trying to find who I am. So then that's when my sister introduced me to yoga. And that's where
yoga, right?
That's where I started enjoying yoga, and then it went from yoga to meditation. So I still do meditation, and I recently got back into yoga because I took a break from it for quite a bit, and just getting back into it made me feel at ease, and like it does help me a lot with like whenever I feel like overly stimulated or I'm going through a really bad sensory overload.
I love this story because I don't know if people, like the general public, understands, say, someone who's neurodivergent, who's having sensory overload, what it is. But I've just noticed there's maybe this assumption that, like, okay, you are the person who is neurodivergent, having sensory overload, that you automatically know how to deal with it. But like anything else, education, you learned strategies. And also, like, your sister, I think, helped you understand that you were in sensory overload, because before that, maybe you had mentioned that you didn't necessarily recognize that that's what it was.
No, I didn't recognize. Like, I was like, why do I always feel emotional? Like, every time I'm in public settings, I'm like, why am I always crying? And then even like when I was like entering my adulthood, is like I used alcohol as a way to calm down my sensory, right? But I didn't know at the time. I was like, okay, maybe if I drink it, I'd be more sociable, because I was just for quite some time I was like, okay, why am I in public settings? I don't do well in public settings. Why am I feeling like I'm gonna cry every time? And I'm not crying because I'm sad or I'm frustrated or I'm angry. That moment at the gym, that's where I knew. I'm like, oh, that's what a sensory overload feels like.
It occurs to me that in school we're not really taught how to self-regulate.
Exactly.
Or that it's a thing, or that, or that it's important.
Yeah, and I find like a lot of people overly use, oh, I'm overly stimulated, but I'm like, without the context of like what it is about. Like I hear a few friends or like family members like, oh, I'm so overly stimulated. I'm like, are you though?
So,
what does it feel like?
Level.
I've noticed people just generally use a lot of vocabulary that like someone with a disability would use. Like people throw around the word bipolar. It's like, but you're not bipolar, and this term shouldn't be used to describe, because I don't know, you're feeling like hyper or manic.
No,
but the problem is that of people using these words kind of just like is that then the meaning of the word is lost. And then people who really are struggling with, say, sensory overload or whatever, then are not taken as seriously.
It's really hard to describe what a sensory overload feels like, but like to me it just feels like something's crawling, and it's like really uncomfortable, and I don't feel like myself. So
the more people learn about themselves, the better you understand everything makes sense.
I'm still learning about myself within, school therapy, because I do take therapy once a month, and like sometimes I talk about certain things, and then sometimes my therapist will be like, oh, it's very common in neurodivergent people, they feel like, for example, like texture. There's certain food textures I don't like ketchup is one of the things I don't like. And she asked me like, what is your thoughts on food textures? I'm like, well, so I explained to her about food texture, and she's like, well, a lot of neurodivergent people have a difficulty with tactile and texture foods. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. And like, even like I brought up something about car motions, and apparently the reason why I get car sickness a lot is because I'm actually overstimulated. There's a term for it which I don't remember, is where you're in the car because there's so much going on, because it's the car maneuvering, and then you have a stressful driver, or let's say if you stressful or not, and then there's music. That's where like I tend to get really nauseous. I thought it was just regular car sickness, but I was reading a booklet that my therapist recommended me. It's a self-care book for neurodivergent people.
You'll have to give me what's the title?
I think it's that, but it is a self
okay.
book.
You'll have to give it to me after.
And it's a really cool tool, specifically where like in between pages, let's say if you are distracted, there's a doodle page where you just doodle, and then when you get back into it, you get back into your self-care plan. And there was a topic on, I don't remember the term, but it's actual reason why people who get car sickness, who especially who are neurodivergent, is because they're actually overstimulated.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, because for quite some time I'm in the car and I had to like literally put my head down because I was about to throw up. I was like, I think I'm having car sickness. But then I'm reading it and I'm reading like the description and stuff. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So like every time I learn something new about myself every single day. And like just the description too, I'm like, and then flashback and all the frustration. I lash out on my mom and I call her. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
This is the first time I've heard this car sickness story. And anyways, I know someone who's neurodivergent and has the same issue. But I always wonder, like, why we're driving so smoothly. Yeah. It's Montreal. There's like potholes and construction everywhere.
Yeah, there's so much though. There's so much going on.
And there's so much going on. And the visual stimulation.
Like,
and this person always gets very car sick.
There's different types of overstimulation.
Yeah.
It's not just sound.
A lot of different types.
It can be vision. It can be texture. It can be anything.
Yeah.
At Dawson, I don't know. Do you have a question?
No.
Do you have accommodations?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So my accommodations I am entitled to is extra time because I have ADHD. So I get an extra an hour more than compared to other students.
I think it's 33%.
And I usually sign up in the exam room because I know myself. I can't do my exam in front of other people. It's not just, I don't have an issue with any other classmates. It's just the paper flipping and then pencil writing and then people chit-chatting. It actually affects my ability to remember. And like I'm very studious. Like I will remember for word to word. Yeah. But if there's one slight sound, I can't do my exam. So I always book my exam room prior to the start of the exam, and then they also require noise cancellation headphones. They also offer me if I need to have like if I'm having a fidgety moment, they can like I can just walk around just for like a couple of minutes.
Yeah, actually in our program we almost have no exams.
Yeah,
like we maybe have one a year.
Yeah, and it's open book, so it's like
sometimes
depending which professor though. But
yeah,
other than that, like it's very a lot of our programs is very self-reflection, right? And I am a very self-reflective person, so like sometimes if I say something or I did something the other day, I'm like I know I did the right thing. Maybe I should have done it better. Or maybe I should have never said that. Maybe did I overshare too much? But another accommodation I get is note-taking because of my dyspraxia. Okay. Which is, I'm still trying to understand it, which is basically kind of like dyslexia, but with body movements. So my brain cannot process the way that I write. So if I'm in classroom and if I have a professor who's more of an auditory teacher, and people write, it takes longer for my brain to process what I'm going to write. So that's why I'm entitled to a keyboard. So that way, if I'm going to write notes on the computer, it's more faster for me to type. And also, too, if I'm dealing with more than one classes, I kind of do want someone to write my notes for me. Let's say if there's information that I'm missing. Yeah. And that's been actually really, been really helpful.
Yeah. Dyspraxia is one of disabilities that I feel is lesser known.
Yeah.
Because even I had students in my class, I had 2 students when I was teaching over at different times who had dyspraxia, and no one could quite explain to me what it was except they needed to use a computer. But now the way you just explained it to me, I'm like,
it's
right.
Because my brain processes information at a slower pace. Like, I'm a gradual learner. I'm not a slow learner. I'm a gradual learner. I gradually learn. But how my brain works is that I receive the information, but it takes longer to go process whether I'm about to say something or formulate a sentence or whether I'm writing. Okay.
Okay, so Mary, I wanted to ask you, so concerning accommodations, I know some students, I've heard talking about their accommodations, and they're pretty happy with them. They think they fit them well, and they don't really have any complaints about them. But other students find that sometimes they don't fit very well, and if they kind of ask for something different or, you know, need something different, then they're met with often some inflexibility or maybe there's like a lack of creativity when it comes to accommodations or something like that. I wanted to know what your experience with that has been.
At the beginning, it was okay because I was like, okay, I'm getting like the things I really need help with. But it got to the point where, let's say, if I ask a question on, like, let's say a software or a device that I think it would be beneficial for me, it was more like, oh no, I don't think you're able to have it. I'm like, why can I not have it? It's like, I'm coming up to you because I need support.
Yeah.
And if I wanted this, for example, there's this type of pen. It's kind of like a read or write software where you press the word on the text and it reads for you through the pen. I think I wanted it.
Is this like a pen on a tablet
type
thing? Okay.
Yeah, it's a pen on a tablet thing. And I'm like, I sure do want this because when I read, just like nothing, no sound or anything, I doze off when I read. So if I have like that read and write concept where it's like an audible and I'm reading at the same time.
Like a screen reader, basically. Yeah.
So I did ask one time. I'm like, hey, I really am interested in getting that type of tablet pen. And she was just asking me, like, oh, why do you need it? It's going to be more challenging. I'm like, I do need it because this is what I struggle with when it comes to, like, you know, doing my assignments. I love to read, but I'm really having a challenging time comprehending, and I need some extra focus and support. And they were very, like, hesitant. So, like, it was, at the beginning, it was, like, good in the sense of, like, okay, you're actually listening to me what I want. But now that if I'm coming up to you and I'm asking you, like, hey, I really want this. And it's not like I'm coming, like, you know, charging at them, like, hey, I really want this now. It's like, no, I really, like, I'm looking into it, and, like, I think this would be beneficial because of da-da-da. There's a bit of hesitance to it. I don't know because it's budgeted.
What's your feeling of the reason behind the hesitancy?
I think it's budgeting. Like,
budgeting.
Like, I don't know how much tablet pens they have for the students. I think it's budgeting, or I don't know.
I think there's a lot of things that it is a budget issue, but I think there's a lot of things that can be fixed without money.
Budget, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like maybe we can bring up the cafeteria for a second.
I
want to know what your impression was with that, because that didn't cost any money to address.
No, it did not. Like,
what's the cafeteria story?
Leigh and I one day were going to the cafeteria because we needed coffee, because we had, I don't know what class it is. I think it was a very long class.
Yeah.
And we were both tired.
I don't think there's a reason to need coffee. You love coffee.
We just like coffee. We just love coffee in general. It's like a soothing thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice until Leigh brought it up. I'm like, have you noticed something different about this layout, the cafeteria? I'm like, I kinda, but it's not clicking. They were like, it's not accessible for wheelchairs. So then I looked and I'm like, oh no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
How can they have access to go to the cafeteria?
Yeah.
So the accessibility center did an oral presentation in our program and talking about, like, accessibility and stuff. So I brought up the whole cafeteria situation. She's like, yeah, we've been noticing that. And they claimed that they were trying to bring it up. What got to me the most was like, oh, they can't have access in, but they have to go through the back.
Ooh, yeah. So
and I did,
like,
say,
you're in a wheelchair, you want to go buy something at the cafeteria, please go through the back door.
So we did a thing in class where we used a wheelchair to see how accessible Dawson was, like, not to actually get a realistic picture, just to get some kind of idea of how accessible the school was.
Right.
And so the entrance and the exits to the cafeteria, the main cafeteria where people buy food,
yeah,
you could not get in with a wheelchair.
Yeah, because how the entry is I don't know what to call, but it's like, you know,
like
those
the turnstile.
the turnstile thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how can someone in the wheelchair or a cane can go?
And there
through
wasn't
it?
like an other entrance.
No.
With the
They
gate. Like,
had-
you know,
there
in
was
the
a-
metro,
there was a
there's
gate.
that thing you could pull open.
So the
was a-
original layout, it used to be like just spread open, so anyone could go through it.
Oh, okay.
But they changed the layout recently. They removed
Yeah.
Tim Hortons, and then they changed the layout. And I'm just like, okay, how can someone with mobility issues couldn't have access to it. So what struck me the most was when the special technician was like, oh, they do have access for them to go in, but they have to go through a circle and go through the back. And I said something, and I was like, don't you think it's segregation?
Yeah. So when I tried to enter through the front in a wheelchair, an employee ran up to me and told me I had to go through the back. The problem was, I think, in part that, first of all, there was a gate that they could open there, but they had not opened the sliding glass doors fully, and they wanted you to use the back if you were in a wheelchair. And so, like, I know when I complained in class about it, and I said, listen, it was really humiliating. I was in a wheelchair trying to get into the cafeteria, and I was being told to enter through the back. And so somebody from the accessibility office went, well, that's your experience. Not everybody else feels like that. And I'm like, well, how come we're not doing anything about these things? Yeah. And they basically told me there was too much red tape.
I just feel like it was very, like, what the person's response was very dismissive, because she wasn't hearing what you're feeling. You're an individual that is actually experiencing these issues.
And also, you can't access this cafeteria and you're asked, like, the only one or whatever to go in the back. How that's not demeaning. Yeah. And forcing people to make all this extra effort. How come all this other students can just easily access the cafeteria, but you have to take all this other time? And
so I brought up the whole segregation between blacks and whites. So you want a black person to go to the back to enter the cafeteria, and they can't go to the front. Don't you find like that's segregation right there and ableism? So when I said that to one of the texts, like she didn't know how to respond. I'm like, oh, I didn't thought about it until you bring it up. And I'm like, you should have think of it prior to it. So what we did was, like, it was to the point where, like, we were getting, like, really frustrated that every time we go to the cafeteria, we were getting, like, constantly angry. So I was looking at Leigh. I was like, you know what? We're going to speak to somebody. So we went and we asked around, like, who do we need to contact with when it got in regards to the cafeteria not being wheelchair accessible. And so we had to go through, it was a process. We had to go through one office to the other, and then we had to get email through the facility management. And then we collectively wrote our part, like, why this is an issue. And then obviously we got it proofreaded before we sent it, and then they did something about it. They partially did something about it. They removed the exit part, but then they moved the entry part.
Yeah, they agreed to open the sliding doors in the front more.
Yeah.
But they did remove all the turnstiles from the exit.
Yeah.
So, which kind of is now like an implicit indication that you should be going through the back. Do you know what I mean? Because, like, if you're in a wheelchair and you have to reach over to open the gate,
right,
it may or may not be difficult for you.
Right.
So it's just much easier to just go in through the back.
It's a little frustrating.
Okay, so I understand. They removed the turnstile.
They removed the turnstiles
exit
in the exit. So the back door where you were, like, where they told you have to go in through the back. That's where they removed the turnstiles.
But they're still in the front.
Yes.
Yeah. And I actually brought it up to the head of the accessibility center. I'm like, why is that not removed? And she was telling me, like, oh, like, they have this particular door that they can just, people with wheelchairs can just open it. But I'm just like, I understand that, because I know, like, some people with wheelchairs or in canes have ways to like, enter, like, a room. But at the same time, what if you're a person in a wheelchair that has fine motor skills?
Yeah.
Who aren't able to grasp on to the door handle? Like, just the amount of questions I'm trying to ask them, it's just more like, she was more
like, why not just do it?
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it, because are they worried too many students are going to rush the cafeteria?
That's basically I think that was their logic.
Like, manage, like, crowd control.
But I mean, we're supposed to be adults at this point.
Yeah,
exactly.
Do you know what I'm saying? I think it's a good lesson, though, for people listening that, you know, complaining can get you places. Like, keep trying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other students in your program also did the wheelchair.
Yeah.
Did anyone else notice that the cafeteria was not accessible?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We were told to take a certain route. And so we noticed that I think most of the bathrooms are also not very, like, they don't have a button to help you open the door or anything like that. What? Sometimes those, even the ones that have the buttons, they don't work.
That's the thing.
I've heard this we've gotten complaints from other universities and cegeps about this, and then the order to repair them is put in, and they're never repaired.
Yeah.
What?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
When the head was like, oh, we could have like an automatic door for people with like physical disabilities. I'm like, what if that there's a technical difficulties? What if there's a defect?
But I think it's these things need to be brought to light and discussed. Maybe there's different solutions, but find a solution instead of kind of shutting down and always using these other solutions like, oh, well, there's this one back door somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I think it's also important to note that like we're talking about the entrances.
Yeah.
And we're talking about one specific need. We're not talking about what it's actually like in the cafeteria, like how easy it is to reach things. How, you know what I mean? Like, is somebody ready to help you out? Like, you know, can you get things that are good for your body there? Like, you know, all these like little things that, like I can't even think of everything, but we're just talking about the entrances. So like, what is everything else like?
Yeah, and I still, like whenever I still go check the cafeteria, see if there's anything changes, and you know, nothing has been changed with the entry.
Yeah,
like still watch the cafeteria every now and then.
They've gone back to like not really opening it properly.
No, they're not.
I walk by every day.
Me too. Like the first thing I go in when I go to Dawson is the cafeteria. I'm like, okay, let's see what's
like, is it open?
Is it open yet?
Yeah.
I'm like, I guess we have to write another letter.
Have you noticed other issues with accessibility at Dawson?
The elevators are having.
The elevators
hasn't been functioning properly.
Thing. The elevators is a whole thing.
I've noticed that a lot.
Yeah,
the elevators haven't functioned properly. Like we have stairs and escalators. I'm like, not many people in wheelchairs or.
So the elevator's not working.
So
you can't go to class if you're in a wheelchair. Basically.
Right. There's regular elevators that are really slow and sometimes are not functioning. But there's also an accessible, I guess, elevator for people. Like you have to have a key. It's specifically for people with disabilities. And often like the maintenance people will be using the same elevator. And so I've seen multiple times somebody in a wheelchair waiting for the elevator, and then somebody with like a big trolley of garbage will pass in front of them, and then they have to wait for the next elevator.
That's why.
And this is somebody who's just trying to get to class. Like the whole point of the school is for students to be there. This person is just trying to get where they're going.
And that's what I've been noticing a lot. I notice a lot of people who, like I know janitors have to go use that elevator because they have like access to it. But I noticed a lot recently that there are people that don't have, like I wouldn't say don't have a disability, but just random people just go into these elevators.
There's also a specific maintenance elevator just down the hall from this elevator.
So, yeah. So
okay,
I've noticed that too, and I'm like, why are you taking this?
And people have made complaints about that, and I've heard they've not been listened to.
Yeah, I think it goes to show that you have to like be on their cases.
Yeah, you got to speak up.
You have to. You guys did speak up.
But people are tired.
And it's like, and I understand like some people have don't want to complain because like don't want to make a concern because like they're gonna be viewed as their fear of being viewed as like, oh, you're just nagging, you're just complaining. Like no, this is an issue, and I'm getting frustrated because you're not listening to these issues and what I'm feeling.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. It's it's a very frustrating situation.
Because how can you want to be known to be more accessible, but then yet there's these issues that are implemented in it, and you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
There's no solution to it. Like we're offering solutions, but it's like you don't want to take it.
You don't want to take it. It's like just remove the things. It doesn't cost any money.
Exactly.
Anyway.
I think we'll need to do an episode just on like there's so many
the tell-all episode.
So many. There's so many.
But I wanted to sort of take
a turn.
So you mentioned like you're almost finished your studies. What are your plans after you graduate?
So my plans after I graduate, I wanted to still work in my field that I'm studying for a year, and then I wanted to register to McGill University to get my bachelor's degree in social work.
Okay.
I wanted to like explore more of the field of social services, and then just to get the feeling of it, and then go to university, McGill, because my mom went to McGill, and I'm like, okay. And I feel like going there is so important to me because I don't want to be like a show off, but like I'm gonna be like the first child that actually went to university, because
in your family,
in my family.
Oh, okay.
Because most of my siblings did went to cégep and stuff, but they didn't pursue education further. So it's just the idea that like.
I think it's okay to show off.
Yeah,
you
know what?
It's hard
But
work.
coming from a big family, it's like okay,
It's hard work and you're doing it.
And it's kind of cool because you being the first, but then it sets a precedent for everyone else. Like, look, I did it. It sort of sets a path for your family, anyways. In my family,
exactly,
it's a similar situation.
And plus, my mom went to McGill, and I don't know. Like, I remember the story. Oh, sorry. I remember my mom was maybe I'm telling the story inaccurately, but I do remember my mom went to school when she was pregnant with me, and she was telling me that when she was pregnant with me and she was going to McGill, a lot of times she was looked down upon because she's a parent. So she used to tell me that like you know, a professor told like you should stay home to your kids, you don't deserve to get education. And what she did was she's like, oh yeah, really? She swore, she's like, kiss my ass, you know. And she graduated before I was born.
Wow.
It's early childhood she graduated. So, and
she was studying early childhood education.
Yeah,
okay.
and
She's a teacher.
Yeah. So and it's interesting because my dad also went to McGill, and my dad was telling me that when I was born, they took me to their classroom when I was just born because they had a course.
Oh, that's now you want to go there.
And
grew
it's like
up
you
at
started
McGill.
out there.
Yeah.
Now you're going back.
And so I was like, I was just born. I was like, yeah. I'm like, was I crying? Because usually when you're a newborn, like you're out of the womb, you're stressed, the baby's stressed, you're just crying. She's like, no, you were up wide awake, you were listening to the professor, and and he looked at me. He's like, I knew right there that you're gonna go to university.
I wonder if you could get credit from that time that you were at class.
I wonder too. Also, my neurologist is a professor now at McGill. So I really hope that the minute I get accepted at McGill, I go see her and be like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I used to be your patient at Montreal Children. She had me until I was about 18.
Okay.
So I actually did a little stalking to find out where she is, because I wanted to talk to her because there was like certain important documentation.
Yeah.
And because I was like past 18, I was like, I was wondering if she can still take me in. And I found out she was the professor at McGill University. I was like, so I want to.
You look like you're like really proud of your progress.
I am, because for a very long time it was really hard to like really, and I am still learning about myself. There are moments where I'm like, oh, I just wish I don't have a disability, but I just have to realize like this is who I am. This is I'm born this way. And just looking back into it, I am so proud of myself, pushing through and not let people affect me.
Yes.
So, and there are moments like especially in my family, like my mom, for example, like my mom's been always supportive, but at the beginning when she found out like I had these diagnoses and stuff, she listened a lot to the doctors. And you know, my mom and I still have like, sometimes we have these conversations here and there. It's like, it's not like I didn't want to believe it. It's just the doctors told me this and this, and I believed them, and I should have not believed them. I should have really understood you and what your talents are, because we do butt heads sometimes, but I think it's a matter of fact that we're both alike. But we have our moments where like she has her moments where she feels like she is questioning my capability, and it's like, mother, I know you're worried, but like I'm fine. I'll let you know when I'm struggling. You know, and like there are sometimes things that could come off as belittling sometimes, which is, you know, it's a mother thing. But I'm like, mother,
because she's also your mother, and it's complicated.
Exactly. But like she's been like, when I told her that like I really want to pursue higher education, she was worried. She was like, I don't think you're gonna do it. Da-da-da-da-da. Obviously, it was emotional for me because it was like, Mom, like I need you to support me. But she was just worried that like, because when I was like at Summit, I used to get meltdowns a lot if I don't understand a certain topic or a question. I cry. I'm like, I really don't understand it. So she was worried about that, which I get it.
She was like trying to be protective, but in a way,
like as if the approach wasn't there.
Yeah.
But like for a very long time, I had that resentment towards her.
Yeah.
But then like, you know, when we'd still have those conversations around that topic, and she's like, it was just because like people are telling me this about you, and I end up believing it, and I shouldn't have, And she apologized, and and she still supports me. She, for now, like right now, she, every time I have a conversation with her, I talk about my day and stuff, because I call her like more frequently. I'm like, hey, how is you doing? And she's like, you know what, Mary, I'm very proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
Aww.
Like you're excelling, and I can't believe I believe those doctors. And I'm like, I shouldn't have.
I wonder if now is a good time to kind of like circle back to the earlier school experience. You said that school was hell for you. So why was it hell? What made it hell?
I think it's the environment that I was in, especially teachers. Like I had really bad histories with teachers. Like they didn't giving themselves the time to understand me and my challenges. A lot of times I got yelled at for something that I couldn't grasp on. I had this once. I think she was a stagiaire, and one of the things I struggled with the most when I started to learn how to speak was reading and writing. It took longer for me to like actually grasp on. To read, and like at 10 years old I had a leapfrog, which was cool. It was a cool device, by the way.
What's a leapfrog?
It's like a book of some sort, but it's like interactive.
It's an interactive book. So it teaches kids under 5 and over to like learn how to read, and it says out the word. I was 10 years old, and I remember as a kid, like I used to feel embarrassed because I'm like, what kind of 10-year-old would have like a kitty leapfrog? But until one friend was like, oh, I really like this. So I'm like, that's another topic we can talk about. I really had a hard time spelling tests. I hate doing tests because it was just something I just couldn't grasp, and I feel like it's because they didn't took the time to like just get to know me and what kind of methods that I'm easily to like learn. So I remember, and I haven't told them like my mom and my siblings about that. I think I told one of my siblings about this, and basically I'm trying to spell this big, it's a very long, like maybe like 12 letter word. I couldn't get it. I couldn't get to spell it, and this stagiaire was like screaming at me, and she called me stupid. She's like, are you stupid? You should know this by now. And I started crying because like she was really like interrogating me.
Oh my God.
And I was crying, and it got to the point where like luckily there was this one French teacher, he was so supportive. He saw, and I remember this, and he was like, that's enough. She's having a hard time. Let her breathe. So luckily that French teacher made a complaint about that stagiaire. I haven't seen her ever since when I was there, but like she made my life a living hell. And it got to the point where like I didn't want to speak out in the classroom to participate because I was like, I don't want to be yelled at.
That makes sense.
Like I don't want to be yelled
at. Like, what if no one wants to be yelled at? So
But that French teacher has been so supportive. He passed away recently, and during the pandemic he had cancer. So when I found out, I was really upset because I'm like, I just like people that are nice to me. If you're not nice to me, like why do I want to continue on communicating with you? And I feel like that's how it should be, maybe in my world.
Well, but especially in a learning environment,
that's the
like
whole job.
Fear and like threatening and punishment. Like how are people going to learn? How are students going to learn in that kind of environment? And it should be an environment where you're allowed to make mistakes and learn from them and evolve.
Especially it sounds like the whole purpose of this school is to be specifically supportive of the individual, and it sounds like that's not what they're doing at all. It's
like it's just a fear of just making mistakes, and for a very long time I was like, okay, I don't want to say something that I end up like hurting someone's feelings or it's wrong. So that's why I always tend to suppress a lot what I'm feeling and what I think. And then when I went to Summit School, and I noticed that a lot of these kids that I was in the class with was agreeing to everybody, I was like, no. It gave me the opportunity to be like, no, let me just speak from my own opinion, And I'm still gradually gaining more of a better, healthier relationship with professors now, because before I was so afraid to talk to them because I didn't, especially at a lot higher level education.
This is
so it's still affecting you.
It still lingers.
Like teachers need to be aware of, especially in higher levels, that some students are coming with these experiences, and to be aware there could be a reaction to teachers based on these negative experiences, and to try to correct, be positive, but to be mindful that people could be hesitant in
because
education
of the experience,
because of these negative experiences.
And like I work in a daycare, and like working with kids, I'm trying to prevent from like kind of learning that behavior that I received from other teachers, just talking to the kids in a way that like, okay, it's calming, but also, you're explaining to them instead of like lecturing them for something that like it's very minor.
Well, because they're kids and they're learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Like
Yeah.
you're not born knowing everything.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And I feel like with my school experiences, the reason why I explained that it was hell, I didn't feel like being treated well. I feel like I've been treated very poorly. I'm here just to learn, not to get lectured for something that like I couldn't grasp onto it like right away.
So I think we were talking a lot about, you know, the treatment of you and other students in your classroom, especially when you were younger, and people who are becoming social workers have to follow a code of ethics, which include respect for the dignity of the client and respect for the client's right to self-determination. And those are really important things that, you know, as professionals we would have to follow once we're but teachers don't necessarily have a code of ethics that they have to follow that would require them to respect the dignity of children and respect their right to self-determination. What do you think of that?
I feel like it's really important that professors and teachers do create a code of ethics, so that way, like, you know, especially the field that we're working in, if we're doing like a multidisciplinary team, we should have like the same values and beliefs.
Also, importantly, it provides a framework for, you know, the way we behave, but also it provides a framework for people to make complaints and to ensure people are treating people correctly.
Exactly. And I've seen that a lot with some professors who don't treat their students correctly. This is not it. Like, you should respect everyone regardless. And I feel like also too it has to do with power too. Like, if you're the teacher and you're the student, it's like, okay, I can tell you whatever I want because I have this power over you.
And I think there's also a sense that, like, when maybe if a teacher doesn't know how to teach a child in a way other than how they've learned to teach, maybe it can cause frustration, and maybe they can take it out on the child or take it out on the class in general, or just maybe kind of like ignore the fact that there's other ways of doing things. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
I think what's really important, especially working in a helping field, is to really reflect on yourself, like a lot of reflection, because sometimes you can be frustrated at a student because it could be one, you don't understand what the student's going through, but also two, you have to ask yourself what is going on in your life that you feel the need to project on it. Because I feel like with some teachers that lash out on students or get frustrated, there's a bit of projection.
Yeah,
it could be overly worked, there's a burnout is happening, or they just don't have enough tools to work with students, specifically students with disabilities. And there are some courses too, but you have to go miles away to get that training.
But I feel like having a code of ethics or guiding values for teachers, that when a teacher is sort of out of line or has lost their way, or you go back to, like, let's get back to the basics. This is the code of ethics, these are the values, like, you're out here, let's bring it back over here. And it's easier to sort of focus what's going on, where because I love this idea of the code of ethics in social work, it helps to focus back to what is the most important thing.
Like work. Just taking a step back and reflect on yourself. I'm like, okay, what is my purpose of teaching? What is my purpose of working with kids? Right. And sometimes we tend to lose ourselves.
Right? And the day-to-day and all the whatever.
And it's okay to go back and relearn things, because maybe there's some teaching methods that you were taught a few years ago and it's no longer,
and society's always changing.
Everything's changing.
We learn new things.
It's there's nothing wrong with going back to a course to be like, oh, okay, you know what, I'm gonna unlearn certain things I was taught years ago and then relearn it in a newer technique. It's all about unlearning, relearning. And also listen to yourself too. Like, listen to yourself. If you're tired, like, I'm tired. I'm tired, I'm burned out, because I feel like there's this like pressure and like, okay, I have to get this done, everything has to be perfect.
With the code of ethics in social work, how is that? Is there like a set of questions that, as a social worker, okay, respect the dignity of the client, that if ever you're questioning or if ever you feel lost, that it brings you back?
Well, like, there's like literally there's like a document.
Big document.
It's a documented code of ethics that you learn and you review, and it gets changed every once in a while.
And when I think of like respecting the dignity of the client, I think of more of like the client's perspective. It's like there's certain areas that they have their own perspective, views, or beliefs about certain topics that you may or may not agree with. But what's really important is like you listen to the client and what their perspectives are, and really respect them. Like you don't have to disagree, but you have to really
respect their experience as they are telling it,
and try not to change the client.
Yeah.
So you're there to guide them and like make them excel, but you're not trying to tell them, okay, this is what you should be. No, if this is who you are, we're gonna stay that who you are.
Right.
We can maneuver and kind of like find ways to get to that goal.
Yeah. Because I think like, you know, with these code of ethics, they often reflect laws as well, eh? So for example, in your case, when you're talking about how you ended up finding out that you didn't graduate from high school, you had some kind of certificate that was like not really usable, that would violate, if there were a code of ethics talking about self-determination, that would violate that code of ethics. But in reality, that's actually a protected right of a person in the Canadian Charter of Rights. And so it's just kind of taken from you.
It's like a part of me that was taken from.
Yeah. Like you didn't have, it seemed like at no point you were given the right to choose what kind of schooling you had, choose to graduate high school until you took it. Do you know what I mean? And it shouldn't have to be that way.
Exactly. And I had to find out on my own. Well, obviously through my family members being there to guide me, but they, like, the school that I was in, they didn't suggest anything. They're just like, oh, she's gonna get support, that's it.
Yeah.
And then for a very long time within my high school experience, it's like, okay, why am I doing these topics where I'm more able to cross something a lot easier? Why is everything easy for me? Like I'm up for a challenge. I'm at the reason like I'm up for a challenge, even if it's really hard. I like challenge, and just sitting there, I'm like, why is everything so like straight? Because usually when you are at a journey, it's usually there's obstacles, right? But like
100%. Well, this is making me think of stuff. But yeah, this idea in certain specialized classes that like just as like build up the students' confidence so that they feel like they're achieving. But then there's this idea like the classwork is easier.
Yeah, it's like why this? It should not be.
Why can't this person face a challenge?
Yeah. And why can't you decide to face that challenge?
Yeah.
Like, why is that not?
I was like, oh my God. Like for me, it's like, what are you protecting us from?
Yeah.
And I feel like you're protecting something, but it's like, you don't need to protect it. If we see, because I know like there are some that do have a challenging time to identify their struggles. And then there's some don't have a hard time to identify their struggles. But like, if those who don't have a hard time identifying struggles will let you know, like, hey, this is the area I'm struggling. I need support.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, maybe the code of ethics in teaching
would be a good idea.
Would be helpful.
Recenter the whole system.
Yeah.
Everyone, it will become balanced.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I feel like it's important. Everyone should reflect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, so reflection is really important in my eyes.
Yeah. I think,
that's how you could get better.
Yeah.
I think we should definitely be holding our caregivers and our teachers and
our politicians
to some sort of
code of ethics,
some sort of like
standard.
reasonable expectations of behavior. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
It's really important. Like I can't say much, but this is really important that teachers should have somewhat, and maybe they're understanding like, what is my code of ethics, like what is my way of teaching, what is my views in teaching, because maybe your views of teaching is different than another teacher's views of teaching. Maybe their way of teaching methods incorrect in their eyes.
But I think a code of ethics would be the umbrella that groups together all the different good philosophies.
Exactly. So like, you know, really like sitting down with a bunch of teachers, I'm like, hey, tell me your view of teaching. And then what you think should we implement in that code of ethics so that way they can all agree to it and then stick to it.
Yeah.
I think we could keep talking about this, but I kind of want to maybe conclude with my favorite self-care question. What do you do for self-care? Like, what do you do outside of school and work to take care of yourself and to have fun?
So other than meditation, I do a lot of fitness work. I go to the gym a lot. I do weightlifting. I do my hair. I feel like hair is something that makes you feel better, especially when I'm like in like a day where like I'm just feeling like not myself, or I'm like really sad about something. I just do my hair. I like to read, and what influenced me to read more was like this one teacher, because like for a very long time like I was afraid to speak up because, you know, the amount of PTSD I had from, not PTSD, a lot of trauma that I had with teachers. That one teacher really support me into like getting better at reading. So that since then, it's like reading is something I really enjoy doing, and it's very therapeutic for me.
What are you reading right now?
So I'm reading this book called Everyone in My Family Had Murdered Someone. I know that's quite odd, but it's basically about this author that talks about his family member who committed a crime, but it wasn't like intentional. It was like there was a situation which led to murder.
So it's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
Murder mystery.
I like mystery. I think it also fits my personality too, because I've been told a lot that like, oh, you're very mysterious. I'm like, do you want to get to know me really? Like, you want to get to know that side of me? But I like to keep it mysterious.
And you said you mentioned you do yoga, meditation. Do you do other like sporty?
So I know this is the stigma behind it, but I do pole dancing.
Oh, cool.
I enjoy it a lot. I've been doing it for 2 years.
Very athletic activity.
It's a lot of core. It's a lot of core and upper body muscle. There is a stigma behind it, because when there's pole dancing, people gonna be like, "Oh, are you becoming a stripper?" I'm like, no. It's an exercise for me, and I love. I just feel like I can be more expressive what I'm feeling, especially with music and stuff. And I find it helps me a lot with my sensory too, and my self-esteem.
It sounds like it helps you like move through a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. I use that a lot throughout my midterms. And I'm like, okay, let's go on that pole.
Let's get ready for the midterm.
Yes, midterm. Whip my hair back and forth.
Well, that's great. It was so nice. It was so great talking today. I'm having so much fun. I feel like we could keep talking for hours. But yeah, I think we'll save some topics for another time.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming, Mary.
No problem.
And thank you, Leigh, for being my co-host.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
This is so much fun.
This is fun.
Yes.
I like it. I really like having this conversation. I mean, this is the field that I want to get into, especially working in schools. I feel like it's really important to have these topics, and what can we improve?
Yes.
But also being heard. I feel like it's definitely very important.
Yeah, especially like the type of clientele I want to go for, especially with like students with disabilities. I really want to hear I just want to be the voice for them, and also for them to vocalize their experiences. Yeah. So we can just spread awareness to like, hey, this is an issue, or this is something that needs to be improved.
Yes.